Alright everyone, it's Thursday. This is the morning briefing from the Celtic Way with me, Hamish. Joe's on. Hello, Joe.
Is it going all right?
Very well. Ryan, you're back from your holidays.
Yes,
Enjoy yourself.
I did. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of, there was no football on, so I didn't exactly miss too much. I know there was international football, but I didn't really bother with that over the international break, if I'm being honest with you. Just took the time to take a wee bit of downtime, but back ready to go. It's an exciting week ahead, 3 home games over the course of a week. So yeah, looking forward to getting in about that, to be honest.
Has he missed anything, Joe? I'm trying to think. Is there anything major? Well,
Yeah,
this
we,
is
we
where
caught up
we could make
off.
something up, couldn't we? We could just
Oh my
so and
goodness, what a
so's
week! What a week we've had.
massive controversy about so and so. Ryan, honestly,
Mm, mm.
cannot
As
believe
long
what
as
they
it's not
did.
about me, I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
Alistair Johnston and the injury that might not be an injury was all I could think of when we spoke off camera, and even that hopefully isn't anything serious. I'm sure we'll be updated when the manager speaks before Hearts.
He didn't play in Canada's second game. Like they played Mexico the other night, and Johnson
Yeah,
didn't play. I don't think there's any major issue there, is there? Because he came off. I think it's a tight hamstring he was feeling during that game against the US, and he probably just wouldn't have been risked. That nothing really to be gained from playing in that second game. But I guess we'll find out from Brendan Rodgers tomorrow, Joe.
yeah, and I think Jesse Marsh had said that it was tightness. Just in case anyone isn't aware, Canada were playing friendlies over the course of the international break. Obviously, there was the Nations League on this side in UEFA, and the CONCACAF one, the likes of Luis Palma was playing in. It was the Euro under 21s qualifiers. Japan were in the World Cup qualifiers, but Canada were playing friendlies, so even less reason to risk them. I didn't see it, but I noticed someone had commenting on one of the Celtic Way's Twitter posts that they had saw it. There was no limping, apparently, even off it was tightness, and it's just a precaution. So fingers crossed that's all true. And yeah, as you say, the manager should update us in his pre-match tomorrow before Hearts.
Yeah, I kind of did a bit of a roundup earlier, Ryan, of our international players, and a lot of them didn't actually play. I think Trusty, Hatate, who was the other one? There's another one who didn't play a single minute.
Scales.
Um, Scales, yeah, Scales didn't play a single minute. Any of those players. And then you had like Daizen Maida, who I think played 20 minutes combined. Arne Engels played 20 minutes. I think Ralston was the main outfielder who'd played a lot. Lewis Palmer played the majority of his time as well. It seems like the majority of the players away have had a bit of a rest, which I guess is good news from a Celtic point of view.
It definitely is. And apart from the Johnson so called injury, hopefully it's nothing too serious because I think he's so important to everything that Celtic have been doing, both defensively and on the attack this season. It's been pretty successful. I think the less minutes that players play in international breaks, the better. I could go on a bit of a rant about how I don't think there should be an international break so soon after a major tournament, after a few major tournaments, because you've got the Copa America
Two more
and the
coming up,
Euros.
Ryan.
You've got October and November as well. I think it's just overkill, if I'm being perfectly honest. I know some people like it. Some people like going away with Scotland, etc. But I think it's overkill, and the domestic football takes a hit because of that. You'll see more injuries coming about, more muscle injuries because of the amount of football. Not just that, but in the actual the way the schedule is nowadays. You know, Celtic are playing 3 games in a week from now, basically until January, or in most weeks, you would say they'll have that sort of schedule. So you're going to see injuries come up, and that's where this squad depth is going to be important. You know, the likes of Ralston coming in for games, Bailly coming in for games, Austin Trusty, etc. All of these new players coming in and out the team. Everybody's going to get minutes. Everybody that thinks at the club at present that isn't out on loan, maybe not Odin Thiago home, he might be struggling for minutes with the midfield. But I think everybody else in and around that first team will be getting minutes over the course of the first half of the season because of just the amount of games that players are now expected to play in football, which is, it's good that there's more football, but bad for the players individually, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not sure Thiago Home was even away with Norway 21s.
Hmm.
He wasn't in any of their match day squads, and you think because he'd been playing for them regularly up until this point. It could just be because he's not featured at all for Celtic, but even last season when he wasn't featuring for us, he was going away with them. I think he's 21. I'm not sure if he's maybe too old, but I think Paulo Bernardo's fine, so it doesn't make sense. But tricky times for Odin Thiago Home. He's not been called into our Champions League squad, of course, so yeah, a kind of tough period for him. Right, okay. A few things to chat about. Northampton, Tim said you've got no suntan. Right.
Is he kidding? I hope he's joking.
Very, very, very hostile reaction.
He's got a white hoodie and everything to accentuate the tan. Come on.
Absolutely, it must be the light because I'm very tanned. I can't. You've got an excuse image there. They're 24/7.
Yeah. Okay. We'll let you away with it, Ryan. That's fine.
I'll take a picture to make sure.
We've got things to chat about, everyone. There's the VAR stuff that I can see you're already firing into in the live chat. No surprise there. We can get on to that. I think we'll have stuff to say about that. And let us know if there's anything else that comes up you want us to discuss. But I wanted to chat about the Alistair Johnston stuff. Report last night that he's to be offered a new contract. I think he's got over 3 years remaining on his current one. I think this end of 2027, so 3 and a bit years. But it seems like the club want him to sign a new deal, just like we did last summer with, like, I think Maida and Kyogo and maybe a few others. Want to make him one of our top earners as well, Joe. And I doubt anyone would have any complaints about that.
Yeah. I mean, these deals come around when players deserve them, don't they? Occasionally you think, I wasn't expecting that, or is it a pure case of protecting your assets? In this instance, it would surely be both. I can't think of a player in recent memory that I've felt has deserved it quite as much as Alistair Johnston, which we've said here on and off camera so many times, and at a time when he has, again, back to the fact that it's hard to believe that he only joined the club last year. He only joined in January. So much has happened in between. He's won so many trophies. He's played such a big part of the team. But this season especially, I know we're not too far into proceedings so far on the competitive side of things, but yeah, if it seems like it's all but heading that way, that it'll be announced at some point, given the reports that are coming through. But yeah, good on him. And I think that you always hear players when this happens that it's maybe been bubbling, but you often hear that it's been bubbling in the background, and whenever they do get it signed, they go, it's good to park that and put it to one side. And now they can just kind of concentrate on everything else that happens on the pitch. He certainly hasn't looked distracted in any way. So, if it's going to make him feel even more settled, then it's brilliant news for Celtic as a team and as a support.
I knew just the mention of the word contract would have everyone messaging about Greg Taylor. I just knew that would be the case, and we can move on to that in a second. Just to finish on Alistair Johnston, Liam asking what's his money now, what would we be putting him on? I'm not 100% sure. I did read, I was doing a bit of kind of research earlier, and a report from when he first joined the club, I think from some American outlet, had his wage when he joined, so his current wage at like 17,000. I saw that mentioned. I think Celtic's top earner is Callum McGregor, as far as I know, is roughly 30. So I don't think Johnson would be going up all the way to 30, but I think kind of mid-20s would be fair enough for a first team player. Andrew reckons there's been some interest in Alistair Johnston over the summer. Perhaps, Andrew, that may well have been the case. I'd be surprised if there wasn't, given the quality of player and the not just for Celtic, but the summer he had with Canada as well. But I think he's happy at Celtic. I think he's very happy at Celtic, and I think we're clearly very happy to have him. So there's no doubt that this new deal is going to go through. I think he's going to want a little bit more money. He deserves it, and Celtic are going to want to have him signed up for a few years. Do you think he'll move on eventually, Ryan, or does he strike you as someone who could be like a Mikael Lustig type player in here for, I think, 7 years, like Lustig was?
I'd love him to be a Mikael Lustig sort of player, because I absolutely adored Mikael Lustig when he was at the club, because he totally got it. Much like Alistair Johnston gets it. He gets what it means to play for Celtic. There was that, I don't know if you've watched it, maybe you covered it last week, but there was that 19-minute interview that he had with Canadian sports, or the Canadian football, or whatever show. It was a podcast of some sort. It was absolutely brilliant, and you can see why he's such a popular member, both on and off the park, with the fans and his teammates alike, because he demands the best. He demands to win. He's got that winning mentality. I just had a wee look there. He's played 67 games for Celtic. It feels like more than that. Yeah, it's a phenomenal number. 67 divided by 5 is something like 13.4. That's how many. I mean, he's won 5 trophies since he's been at Celtic.
Yeah.
So he wins a trophy every 13 games, 13 and a half games. He's a winner. He's used to winning at Celtic. And I think he drives those standards right up as well. I really enjoy watching him play in this team. I think he could be one of the players that could stay around for a bit. He's at that age. He's, 25, 26 now. So, he's getting towards that prime age where he could maybe test himself in a tougher league, but he'll be playing in the Champions League with Celtic and he'll be testing himself at the highest level anyway. For me, I think he could be... Now, I'm not pushing Callum McGregor away because I don't want him stopping being the captain anytime soon. If I'm looking at Alistair Johnston, I'm seeing a prime candidate for the next captain. Once Callum McGregor hangs up his boots, I know that he'll be maybe 29, 30 when that happens, but I just think he's a leader and he totally gets it. He understands what it means to play for Celtic. You can see those leadership qualities. He's good on the ball. He's good off the ball. He's improving under Brendan Rodgers this season. I think the past couple of games in particular against Rangers and St Mirren, he's really came alive. The stats back that up because he was arguably Celtic's best player in both games. I just think the sky's the limit for him at the moment, and he's a player growing game by game. I'm really looking forward to seeing him apply his trade in the Champions League because I think he'll be a weapon for Celtic on that right-hand side, along with Kuhn.
Joe, the general consensus, just reading a few comments like AR's, is that the big offer will come in one day for Johnston and he'll move on.
I think the worry is that if he has a marquee Champions League performances over the next several weeks, that's the Copa America and the Champions League. In terms of how he can play, it doesn't really get bigger than that. I understand the money talks. It depends on what the player wants. Settled here, engaged here as partners from here. He's loved by Celtic. He's trying to say it's Champions League. Can he guarantee he's going to get that elsewhere? Can he guarantee that he'll have the fans adoring him in this way that they do here? I don't think so. But we obviously say this through a lens of bias and having seen it happen in the past. I think that it goes back to what we've said so many times about the player. There's still more to come, and I think there's still more to come at Celtic. And to be fair, I don't think that Alistair Johnston was brilliant in the Champions League last year. No. I think that he has a point to prove. The worry, as looking through the lens of a Celtic supporter on the media side, is that if he proves that point, then conversations will be asked or be had, or maybe need to swat off the interest then. But again, that only feeds into the fact that it makes sense that they're tying him down on a longer contract, again protecting your asset. But that's the beauty of this next stretch of Champions League. We look at the nuts and bolts of it. How exciting it's going to be in Celtic Park, how we might have a chance to do something given the draw, but also, the excitement that you don't necessarily welcome is the intrigue, is the interest that you might have on some of your better players. But equally, is that going to drive them more? That they might, if they're that way inclined, who knows? So the next several weeks will be really exciting. I hope that Johnston plays well, but I hope that it's for Celtic and only Celtic.
Yeah, listen, I think he's got a long way to go still, and a lot of potential. But he's been great for us so far. But no, a new deal I think is really good news. What about Greg Taylor then? I think Greg Taylor, James Forrest out of contract next summer, Kasper Schmeichel as well. I actually thought Schmeichel signed a 2-year deal. Only today when I checked I realised that it was a 1-year deal. So how many of those 3 will be renewed before the end of the season, Ryan?
I think in the Greg Taylor situation, it's up to Greg Taylor because Celtic have offered them fresh terms. I think they've offered them 1 or 2 new deals and he's knocked them back for whatever reason. It's not the case that Celtic haven't offered them a deal. They have. He just knocked it back because he didn't see it as being good enough. He is a first team player as well, so he's well within his rights to try and get the best offer possible. You hear some things about potentially him maybe wanting to move down south to try something different. You've heard those murmurings a couple of times, and he's of that age that he might want to try something. He's done everything at Celtic. He's won the league. He's won every trophy there is to win domestically. So he might be one of these players that sees his taking his talents, down south and trying something new, something fresh. But I think he's an important player. He definitely is an important player this season. Again, I think the two fullbacks have started really, really strongly this season. It's good that there's now competition in both areas, because you've got Ralston on the right-hand side, but you've also got Bailly, who can play on the left and right-hand side. So that then brings even more competition. Hansi Flick played Bailly at right back during pre-season. If you can do that at Barcelona, you can certainly do it at Celtic, I think. So looking forward to seeing a bit more of him in action, maybe even at the weekend. Although I'd probably be looking at that Falkirk game as the ideal game to give him his first start for Celtic. That and a few other players that could maybe come in and make a difference or make their bow at Celtic Park. But I think it's important that Celtic do sign Greg Taylor up. I know he's a bit of a divisive player amongst the fan base. Some people like him, other people think that you can get better. I'm somewhere in the middle. I do enjoy what Greg Taylor brings. I also think that they can improve in that position. Excited to see what Bailly can do. But I think it's important because he's a leader in that dressing room. You can see it in all the interviews and all the press conferences. He is a leader and people feed off of him. And again, he knows the geography. He's lived in Scotland all his life. He knows what it's like to play for Celtic. That's something you can't talk about on a stat sheet or a spreadsheet, being able to know what it means to play for Celtic, and he certainly does. He drives those standards in training and on the pitch, and he's a bit of a moaner on the pitch as well. You notice that when you watch him in person, but I think that's good because it's different personalities and he drives the standards, as does Alistair Johnston. I think those two fullbacks are so important to what Celtic do because I think communication is key, and they certainly have a lot of that on the pitch.
It's interesting because, like, you're right, Taylor is a bit of a divisive figure. I don't think generally, I think everyone understands that Greg Taylor's been a good signing. You look at Greg Taylor and what he's offered us, he's been a good signing. I don't think there's any debate about that. I think maybe some people, the argument they have, and I'm part of this as well, is that maybe he's a weak link in the Champions League, that top level. Maybe he's a player who's exploited, not like Alistair Johnston perhaps, and maybe if we could just find an Alistair Johnston on the other side, it would make a difference. And I think it's fine to say that as well, but the point I'm making is it's interesting that he has his critics, but when it comes to a new contract chat, I've not seen one person yet saying, oh, this is absolutely fine that Taylor's contract's running down. Everyone I'm seeing is going, oh, we need to get Greg Taylor signed up. So everyone clearly realises that he's a pretty important player for us, Joe.
Yeah, and I think I might be showing my age here. The older I get, the more time I lose sense of the context of it. But Taylor signed in 2019? So 5 years in that squad, as you say, Ryan, Scottish player who knows the country, knows what it's like, understands everything. We talk so much about Callum McGregor being that stalwart in the dressing room. James Forrest, a completely different character, but having been there for a long time. You think about players like Luke McCowan coming in, a Scottish guy who's a Celtic supporter who gets it. You look at Vi on loan, who is young and is coming from a different country, which has its own issues. Greg Taylor is among that glut of Scottish players who are an integral part of welcoming players in. Scott Bain's another one behind the scenes who's really well liked. Tony Ralston as well. But Greg Taylor, I don't know if it's because of the pandemic and obviously a disappointing season thrown in as well, but I sometimes forget that he's been at Celtic for quite so long. Yeah, I agree that perhaps there needs to be, I've always wanted more competition in that place. I think Greg Taylor started the season really well. I think that he's earned his place. Like Liam Scales, under a fair bit of criticism, but stepped up so far. Again, still to face the kind of real competition in the Champions League. But if it comes down to getting the players locked down, and again, we've no idea what the club has offered, if it is reasonable and Greg Taylor's just playing a little bit hard to get or hardball, or if it's not a good offer, we'll probably never know these things. But I think as someone who has been here for so long, is that face in the dressing room, is well liked, and maybe not quite as comparable as your Callum McGregors and James Forrest, but he's got to be up there in terms of welcoming for the dressing room. So I think it's imperative.
Imagine how many trophies he's won.
Down. Exactly. Wow. And even beyond the trophies, like how many Glasgow derbies has he played in that time? Do you know, there's so many stats that could feed off of his experience in that time. And again, maybe it's because I'm getting old, but I sometimes think, Christ, he's been here for 5 years. Like that's a long time. So I think again, if anyone else, you speak about people earning a contract, I hope that they can come to an agreement between player, agent, and club altogether.
It's weird because there was there was a lot of excitement when Greg Taylor was signed. I remember. I think it was deadline day in 2019.
Him and
there was a bit
Bolly,
of
wasn't it?
Yeah, Ball and Goalie signed, and then there was another left back coming through. You're like, what's this all about? Why are we signing two left backs? Not that I was complaining, it's good to have competition, but you're like, have they maybe seen something in training, or they haven't seen something in training that's prompted them to go and get Greg Taylor that late on? But there was a lot of excitement when he signed, I remember, and I think there always is at the start with Scottish players coming to the club. I think fans want to get behind these players, and then they maybe see them and maybe they're the first targets when they don't do so well. It's a bit of a topsy-turvy sort of mentality, and I'm guilty of it myself. You will look at the Scottish players and be like, you expect more of these players because they know the surroundings, they know what's expected of them, they know what it's like to play for Celtic and to watch Celtic. But he's now shown signs of going back to that Ange Postecoglou second season, which is really, really good. I think last season was a difficult one for him, but it was difficult for a lot of players to try and get used to Brendan Rodgers' style. He was a player that wasn't there with Brendan Rodgers the first time he was signed under Neil Lennon, so it was a completely different change. He was used to playing that radical style of Ange Postecoglou. But now that Brendan Rodgers has kind of moved back into this sort of hybrid of the two, because Johnston plays as an out-and-out right back, but Taylor's quite interesting because he plays as a bit of an inverted one on that left-hand side. It's really helping the midfield and it's helping his game. It's clearly something that he thrives on. And, if you can get the best out of Greg Taylor, it could be such a useful asset in the middle of the park and on the wing. So I hope that Celtic do sign him up to a new deal. He does deserve it. He's ever present in the first team. It's up to players like Alex Bailly, Tony Ralston, etc. to try and take that position off him. But, he's been there for 5 years and he's been pretty much first choice the entire time he's been there, apart from when Diego Laxalt was playing in the COVID season. But we don't need to talk about that.
We definitely don't. Hopefully we hear of chat about Greg Taylor. I think I personally, it's just my opinion, I feel it'd be a shame if he did leave at the end of this season. I'd like to see him sign a new deal, but as you say, you don't know what Brendan Rodgers' plan is. You don't know what Greg Taylor's plan for the future is. So we'll have to wait and see. Final thing I wanted to chat about today was this VAR stuff yesterday. I don't know if you caught it, but Willie Collum's been out doing making various media appearances. I think he was in Clyde Super Scoreboard. I'm half expecting him on here. None of you have booked him, have you?
He's not got back to me
next week.
And he has I think he's possibly doing the show that I now forget the name of, the one that Gordon Duncan and Sam North are doing on
VAR review or the warm-up.
The warm-up. I think he might be doing that because I saw they'd posted about some refereeing episodes, so I'm assuming he's on there as well. And he did as you say, the VAR review, which is I'm reading this from their YouTube, a brand new monthly show that gives Scottish football fans a behind-the-scenes look at some of the big decisions made across the game, whether they are right or wrong, and how those decisions are reached. So a lot of people watching this, I'm guessing, will already have seen this, but a monthly show. First one, September's one, aired last night, and basically it was Gordon Duncan sitting next to Willie Collum, going through the several, I think 10 big decisions from the first part of the season, showing the footage of it, playing the audio between the VAR and the on-field referee, and Willie Collum explaining how some of these decisions were reached. And there was a couple of Celtic related decisions in there as well. Willie Collum said one had been got right, the James Forrest one against Hibs in the Cup at Celtic Park, when he drove through and had a couple of players come towards him. At the time I thought it was a penalty. Listen, if they've raised the bar for what a penalty is, I can understand maybe why it wasn't given. It may have been slightly soft if it was given, but I can see also why it would be given. The big one was the Kyogo one against Kelly that we touched on at the time on Flag Day, when he's wiped out by Robbie McCrory and somehow the penalty isn't given. And Willie Collum actually said that he believed it was the wrong decision, which I thought was quite interesting. So there's lots we can tackle here, Joe, but first of all, your thoughts on this idea of a show where they sit and actually go through decisions.
Yeah, I'm quite torn about the whole thing. Actually, I thought because the Premier League have been doing something similar for a while, and I really appreciate the transparency. The thing that we're dealing with in Scotland, which is totally different, is obviously the professional versus part-time referees, and whilst there is an element of me that admires, as part of me admires the fact that Willie Collum can sit there and say we got this wrong. VAR has been nothing but controversial in Scotland since its implementation, and the Kyogo one, we all know that was wrong. You know, you saw it, and the frustrating thing is to watch it back. You know, because it was at the start of the season, and Celtic won that game comfortably. The way that Celtic are playing just now, and this isn't a cop out, but the way that Celtic are playing just now, I would like to hope that the VAR decisions, even if they're incorrect, aren't stopping Celtic in this brilliant form. But that's besides the point. What bringing the Kyogo thing back up is doing is reminding us how bad it was, and then proving that VAR doesn't work in that instance. Like the referee's made a mistake in the moment, which is an issue in itself, but fine, that's why VAR's there. And then someone's watched that in a VAR room in slow motion and still decided that that's not a penalty, and that shows the system's broken. So yeah, the transparency is great, but it's also shining a light on how poorly VAR is being handled. You know what I mean? It sounds like a weird complaint because I do like the transparency. I do want them to talk about it. If they feel they've got it wrong, I want them to acknowledge that. But at the same time, it's just exasperating. I can completely understand why Celtic fans are so upset about it. So I don't know, because at some point, sorry, what am I trying to say? Last season, there was a lot of complaints in the season before about how long they were taking to make decisions. The Kyogo one was made in 30 seconds, wrongly. That's not any better. Do you know what I mean? And at some point, there will be a big decision in a Glasgow derby or in a game that Celtic need to win, or even Rangers or any other team, and it will be back in the headlines. And at that point, what do we do? What's the solution? So, yeah, I'm quite torn either way. I appreciate the transparency, but I find myself completely exasperated about something that happened months ago all over again, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that for me is it, Ryan. This is all well and good, but it's getting the decision right at the time that's the main thing. And I just like that Kyogo one. I can't. I know we're 3-0 up, but forget that. It doesn't matter the score. How is that not a penalty? And we said it at the time, and then I just don't get how VAR. VAR. Okay, the referee apparently was blinded because we took a kind of strange free kick because O'Reilly chipped it over the wall, and alright, the referee on the pitch doesn't see it. But how VAR doesn't give it? I guess I'm never going to be satisfied, because what I want to happen is them to get that decision right, and we can't go back and get it right. So I do think this is a positive move from Willie Collum, who clearly wants to be transparent about this thing, but I guess getting the decision right is the main thing.
Yeah, I think the first thing I've got to say is that I wholeheartedly agree with having this show. I think it's important because people moan all the time about, oh, what about this decision, what about that? There needs to be transparency, and I'm delighted that they're taking these steps in order to show that, rightly or wrongly, with the decisions that are being made. I want to hear the reasonings why these decisions are being made. So the fact that you're getting the audio and you're hearing things is welcoming. I think it's a good change. I think there needs to be that transparency in football. There's just too much on the line for there not to be. So I do welcome that. I just don't understand how 3 or 4 people can make that mistake. I understand one person can on the pitch, but the people off the pitch, they've got loads of time to check an incident, and they looked at that and they looked at it again and thought that wasn't a penalty. There was a similar incident last season in the Premier League, I remember, with Andre Onana, who took out a Wolves player. It was a goalkeeper taking out the player, and the same decision was given. But then, there was a bit of an uproar in the media for about 3 or 4 days after, saying, how was this not a penalty? And I just didn't think I would see one of these incidents again, because there was that much of an outcry by the English media at that time. So it was the exact same thing. I'd actually go as far to say the Kyogo one is worse, because he's trying to get away from the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper clatters him. Whereas the Andre Onana one, the two kind of collide together, but I still think it's a penalty on the Wolves player. It baffles me how that wasn't given through VAR. I understand why the referee didn't give it, but the fact that it goes through VAR and it stops the game. I've always said that VAR, I like it being in football, but I think it hurts Celtic, because I think it hurts the flow of games, especially when Celtic are maybe 0-0 each or 1-0 up. and it stops the game, and then they're at a standstill and they're waiting on a decision. There can maybe be a decision that takes a minute or two to actually finalise, good or bad. But it kills the momentum of the game for Celtic. I always think it's one of the best defences against Celtic is a VAR check, because it completely kills Celtic's flow in the game. But that one was, I know they were up 2 or 3-0 at that point, so it was academic, but it still should have been given. It was a clear penalty, clear as day, and it wasn't. So I'm all for the transparency, but airing your mistakes like that mustn't be the best thing, especially on television.
Do you think it's made worse by the fact that was day one? Do you think that we were expecting VAR to have learned over the summer, the new introductions, the new hierarchy and stuff, and then, the first game Celtic play that it ends up such a controversial decision? Do you think that makes any difference? I'm not sure if it does for me. I'm just thinking out loud, I suppose.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I wondered, generally this season, would you say VAR has been a bit better? I don't feel like it's quite impacting games in the same way as last season, but I do genuinely feel like things have improved. They're still not where I'd want them to be, but I do feel maybe like they're kind of being a little bit quicker with things, and also I think the penalty stuff and the handball stuff is a positive move. The fact they've raised the bar for these things, because it was an absolute joke, and we were in the end of some horrendous decisions when VAR first came in. I remember like a Matt O'Reilly one against, I think it was Ross County or Dundee United, and there was another one, a Bernabe one, was hand behind his head that was given, and ridiculous things. So I think that's a good move. We saw that first game of the season. Remember Hearts Rangers, when one of the Rangers players, I think it was Connor Barron, one of the ones he actually spoke about in the video. He has his arm there, and last season Willie Collins said that would probably been a penalty, but this year it's not going to be. So I'm fine with that, but we need consistency. Like, it's going to be so frustrating. Like if another team, I say one team in particular, has one where one of their players gets clattered by the goalkeeper and a penalty's given, that's going to be really frustrating. The other point I would make is, like, it's fine doing it after, the first game of the season when you're 3-0 up against Killie, but what happens if there's a contentious issue in a derby later this season? Are they going to be just as open about that? It's going to be interesting to see, but still not a fan of VAR generally. I'd introduce a challenge system. That's my solution. Every team gets one challenge a game. If you get it right, you keep your challenge and take it that way.
I would agree with that. I like the challenge sort of system in basketball. I like it in tennis as well, and I don't think it's too. Yeah. I don't think it's too much of an intervention from technology into football. I like that challenge system. It also brings something as well to the game. I don't want the sport to be Americanized too much, but I do think there are some ways in which technology can help the game for the better without it intervening too much into the sort of essence of sport. So yeah, I wouldn't be against that at all. Anything that can improve the game, but still using the technology, because we've got to learn to live with this technology. It's going to be there. They can't take it away now. I think the players are now slowly but surely getting used to it. So yeah, it's one of those ones. They're going to have to just find ways to improve it.
Just one final wee thing, because I'm sure I'd read this somewhere, and I've just, while you were talking there, searched for it. So the FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup is going on right now. I think it's in South America somewhere. And I'm just reading here. So they've got a thing called Football Video Support, and it's an alternative to VAR, which simplifies the video assistant referee. The FES system does not use video match officials. The head coach of each team is allowed to make a video review request. The number of requests that coaches can realise during the match are limited, so I'm not sure how many you get, but basically it is that. I think you get to, if an incident happens in the game that you think should be checked by the referee on the screen at the side of the park, you can request that. I think like it'd be the same instance, like penalties, goals, offsides, etc. So FIFA are doing that right now in the Under-20 Women's World Cup. So maybe that's the future. VAR's just a bit too much for me. Anything else, Joe?
It's investment in Scottish football, isn't it? Like, I think, how much was all that going to cost? And for me Personally, I would rather see professional refs first. I wanted that before VAR, and it's maybe out of step with the rest of club football elsewhere, but it's, Celtic and Rangers can afford the investment, but Scottish football generally as a whole, as a sum, can't. And I think that for me, I like VAR in principle. It's the consistency which hasn't been there in Scottish football so far for me. It might prove itself to be more consistent this year. Obviously, we're still quite early in the season, but I welcome anyway that's going to help the game. But professional refs would be the first port of call for me in Scotland.
Cool. Anything else, Ryan? It doesn't have to be VAR related.
I'm just looking forward to getting back to Celtic Park at the weekend. I feel like a lot of the talk, it was obviously the transfer window and the Champions League draw and the Rangers game. The Rangers game encompassed everything that weekend once the transfer window was over. Now I'm really looking forward to getting back to Celtic Park and seeing some of those new players in a different scenario rather than just getting thrown in at a Glasgow derby, because that was all encompassing. Now it's against Hearts, a team that are admittedly struggling at the moment. They've had a lot of time to think about how badly their season has started for them. But I'm just looking forward to, in particular, seeing Arne Engels in more detail. He's made his debut for the Belgium national team. I listened to both his press conferences the other day, both his fan media and the traditional media press conference. I thought both were absolutely brilliant from his perspective. Good speaker, doesn't look too under pressure to deliver. He wants to repay the team rather than sink under the pressure of being the record transfer fee. So I'm looking forward to seeing him and the rest of the new players coming in. Just an exciting week coming up. 3 home games. Get a bit of momentum. A Saturday at 3:00 game as well. First one this season. It's taken until the 14th of September for it to actually come around. But looking forward to that.
First Saturday game full stop, isn't it? Because it's been Sunday, I'm pretty sure, the whole way. So good.
Exciting.
Fabulous.
It's good.
Yes. Anything else, Joe?
No, I just hope that Ryan gets himself for a sunbed before he comes back on the reef.
You're very defensive about that, Ryan. Very defensive.
It honestly must be the camera, because Joe will see it in about an hour's time when I'm meeting him in the office. That sounded a bit threatening. I didn't mean it like that. I do have a tan.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Right, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. Same goes for all of you. Thanks for watching, tuning in, etc. We will return tomorrow for the final morning briefing of the week. Speak to you then.